Joining us on TheInformer is Kate Fitz-Gibbon, and she's the director of the Monash Gender and Family Violence Prevention Centre and also Associate Professor of Criminology in the School of Social Sciences at Monash University. Now, it is a mouthful, and I did read it, but you have a tremendous opportunity to do some tremendous work. And one of the questions that is affecting all of us at this juncture is the mental health of our community, the broader mental health of our community. People are coping, they're doing the best they can, but family violence, we're hearing that it's on the rise. Why is it now considered a national emergency in Australia? What have we done wrong? What aren't we doing right? Why has it become such I don't want to use the word epidemic, but why is it now a national story?
Absolutely. So the challenge that we have in Australia is that family violence has been at emergency levels since before the pandemic. And now during the COVID-19 global health pandemic, we're seeing that the rates of family violence are increasing in frequency and also in severity. So we have an emergency kind of within a pandemic, and this is not something that's necessarily unique to Australia, but it's certainly something that Australia has to deal with as a matter of urgency.
Why has it got to the stage where we are at the moment? Why have we allowed it to get this far? Why haven't we as a society coped better?
Look, I think there's multiple things that lie under that question. So on the one hand, this is a global issue. It's not something that is easy to address. So it's not so much that we've let it happen, but we did certainly ignore it for a very long time, for decades, in fact. And then now we've seen over the last 10 years, as we've recognised this is a significant issue for the Australian community, the extent and the devastating consequences of it have really come to light. So now that we've acknowledged it, now we need to move to dedicate the resources and the attention needed to effectively respond to it. And we're not yet quite doing that to the degree that we need to be.
So do we have a policy that is answering it or attempting to answer the challenges that this rise in family violence is creating?
So we certainly have a range of different policy responses, practice responses and laws that address all forms of family violence and violence against women. What we need to consider is whether these are effective, whether they're evidence informed, and whether they're resourced to meet the significant needs that women and children have during this period. And while we saw, over the last 5 years, things like the Victorian Royal Commission into Family Violence, Queensland had the Special Task Force headed up by Quinton Bryce. We had Malcolm Turnbull, the former Prime Minister, stand up and say that this was a national emergency. We still haven't seen the level of resources at the state and the federal level dedicated to really, truly taking women's security and lives seriously. We need to devote...
Kate Fitz-Gibbon, why is that the case? Why have we been so tardy, so slow to answer the call?
I think for too long we didn't see this as real violence. We saw it as a private issue, something that happens behind closed doors, something that police, for example, 20 years ago didn't view as a real policing issue. I think we're getting better now. We recognise this is serious. We know that on average a woman a week in Australia is killed by men's violence, but we still need to devote the resources to it, devote the funding to it that we would devote to any other issue that kills one woman a week.
You talk about police and attitudes. Have they changed? Has the police force, has the hierarchy addressed the challenge? And now are we seeing new training to see that the next crop of policemen and women are doing a better job at policing a problem that as 20 years ago they thought, hey, it's not ours to worry about?
Absolutely. I think there is an evolution amongst police across Australia, which is really positive. There's still a long way to go, but we're seeing the emergence of specialist family violence police officers. We're seeing much more significant training dedicated to family violence when officers come into the academy and as they move through the ranks. So we're definitely improving policing. There's always going to be room for more improvement, and that's okay. We can keep evaluating, keep learning, and keep improving it, and we need to be willing to do that.
Speaking of learning, have we got more information coming out to give us a sense of the extent of violence against women since the beginning of the pandemic?
Absolutely. So myself and colleagues at the Monash Gender and Family Violence Prevention Centre have been researching this issue since early March, when Australian states and territories first moved into varying levels of government enforced lockdown. And it's incredibly hard to obviously access women during this time and to safely understand what they're experiencing. But in our research with practitioners, we're hearing that violence against women during this period has increased in its severity, has increased in its frequency, and that it's also increased in the number of first-time relationships that have turned abusive during this period. The biggest message that we're trying to send out is that support services, frontline responders, are still operating, and that if you are not safe in your home, that is a legitimate reason to leave, and that you can seek help either in person or remotely during this period.
What's the remote way of doing it through this pandemic?
So we've seen that services like Safe Steps in Victoria, 1800 Respect, which is the national helpline, have opened up both phone helpline and online web-based chat. So that's something that you can do on your computer or on your phone. And there's safe exit buttons and ways to clear your browser history so that no one would know that you've accessed those helps. And that's an immediate way to get...
Sorry, Kate. It seems to me that this is a cultural problem. And we have struggled with it forever and a day. And as you said, there's now an understanding that we have to move forward. Do we have to maybe take our conditioning or our education to even the earliest days of our schooling to try and grab the young minds and give them the positive thoughts so that as they grow, they understand if there is a problem at home, it is a problem at home that we can address.
Absolutely, and that we can address in a non-violent way. You know, it's devastating to think how many Australian children are growing up in households at the moment where there is violence, and what that means in terms of their own understanding as to how conflict within intimate partner relationships is resolved and how a woman within an intimate partner relationship should be treated. We need to ensure that Australia, even at times like the global pandemic, continues to progress in achieving gender equality. We know that gender equality is essential to combating family violence and all forms of violence against women. So we need to ensure that that's happening at all levels of the community, in workplaces, in different community groups, and that it's being shown by our leadership as well.
The other challenge, I dare say, we have so many different communities in Australia today than we had 20, 30, 40 years ago. Are we getting the message through in their own languages?
That's incredibly important. And I think digital engagement strategies and ensuring that information about the unacceptability of violence, but also about help-seeking options, is made available to all of our diverse communities in Australia. We know that family violence impacts all areas of our community. It's not a problem that is kind of isolated to one particular community group. It's everywhere, unfortunately. So we need to ensure in our responses that we're catering to all diverse community groups, cultures, languages, and also to some of our populations that find it particularly hard to access help. For example, during this period, women with disabilities, members of culturally and linguistically diverse communities, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. So we really need to use the full suite of tools to understand how we can best help these community groups.
Well, it's important that we shine a light, and Kate Fitz-Gibbon from Monash Uni is doing that in her work. Thank you very much, Kate, for joining us on The Informer and talking out and giving us a sense of just what the problem is, how big it is, and what sort of strategies we need to adopt, and how far back we need to go to grab everybody and take them on this journey. And it was enlightening to hear that you believe that the police force and its attitude to family violence is changing and continues to change. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.